For years, a franchise was mistreated. Media created for tax purposes or crude attempts to capture audiences during heights of sci-fi popularity. Until the Lisan al-Gaib of the genre stepped forth and created two of the best space operas audiences have ever seen.
Okay, so when I initially made this video, I was in the process of moving, and I didn't have time to fully develop the idea. I wrote a short script, and I filmed it thinking it would be good enough. Then, I realized I didn't do this series justice whatsoever, so I decided to keep my original footage and add in this voiceover to further explain points I made in my original video. With all that being said,
this is the story of Frank Herbert's Dune. Released in 1965, Frank Herbert's Dune paved the way for the sci-fi genre. And since its release, it's seen its fair share of copycats, some of them becoming even bigger than the book itself. And although Dune has 6 books to its name, by far the most popular is the first one. Following Paul Atreides after the destruction of his house and rising up on a foreign world to overtake the Empire and reclaim what is his, creates the perfect hero's journey, even though that was never the intention.
Dune is meant to be a story about the animalistic nature of humans. That despite our societies and our rules, deep down, we are animals. Recall when the Bene Gesserit tested Paul to see if he was truly human. In an interview with NBC, Frank Herbert says,
heavily imbued with Jungian psychology, so I think that we do have a sense of the mindless animal in the depths.
In this same interview, when asked, what is your message or statement, Frank Herbert goes on to say, don't trust leaders to always be right. I worked to create a leader in this book who would be really attractive, charismatic person for all of the good reasons.
You see, Frank Herbert's actual intention was for Paul to be a cautionary tale for messiahs, leaders, and so-called great men. And in the books, after Paul becomes the Messiah, he only brings unprecedented devastation to millions. Though it is made abundantly clear that Paul doesn't necessarily want any of this to happen, which has led readers to believe that this is really a critique about power and those who wield it. But why does any of this even matter? Well, it matters because this story has been retold over and over and over again, and often it's misinterpreted. A great example, and honestly probably the biggest one, is Star Wars. Star Wars steals a lot from Dune, and if I were to tell you everything it steals from Dune, we would probably be here for over an hour. So instead, I'm going to tell you 3 major plot points that Star Wars steals directly from Dune. Number 1, the Force and the Voice are essentially the exact same concept. A group of elders know how to use it for their benefit, and the main character is unnaturally gifted in it. Number 2 is the Emperor and the Empire pulling the strings of a lot of things in the main character's life, even going as far as having his grandfather be the Emperor's right-hand man. And number 3, the character descending from an evil bloodline.
The concept of the Chosen One descending from madmen most likely came from Frank's own childhood experience. As a young man, he had to drop out of high school and take himself and his sister away from his alcoholic parents. He would decide to stay with extended family with whom he felt more comfortable with. And during my research, I actually found out that a lot of the characters and character concepts stem from real individuals in Frank Herbert's life. For example, the Bene Gesserit is based off of Herbert's religious aunts. The inspiration for the Mentats came from his grandmother, who was able to do calculations in her head in mere seconds. And Aaliyah was based off of Frank himself, as Frank grew up as a gifted child, with many saying he was too old for his age. It's also worth noting that Frank had developed a love for nature and ecology at a very young age. This love would only grow as he aged, and as a Navyman he fell in love with isolated environments, seas, deserts, forests, etc. And Herbert expressed his fascination through his writings, helping create unforgettable settings, just like Arrakis in Dune.
But while we're on the topic of movie adaptations, let's go ahead and talk about the actual movie adaptation, Dune 1984. Created as a quick cash grab to capitalize on the popularity of Star Wars at the time, Dune does not faithfully recreate the book in any way. The key difference between the book and the film is that Paul is actually a messiah, and because of the success of Star Wars, the filmmakers decided to give Paul messiah-like abilities that were nowhere to be found in the book. Like, for example, he uses the voice to make it rain on Arrakis. That never happened. He can't do that. That's not how the voice works.
That's not how the Force works.
In total, Dune 1984 cost around $45 million to make and only gained around $30 million at the box office, effectively making it a failure. A failure of this size essentially tarnished the reputation of the IP in the eyes of many studios, which left it untouched for years. Now, that's not to say there aren't fans of this movie. Obviously, there are, and there still is, but in the majority of the audience's eyes, this was a very stupid movie, and ergo, the studios would think the same. We wouldn't see another adaptation of the book until the year 2000 with the Dune miniseries, Dune, and Children of Dune. After the release of these two projects, we would not see another adaptation for almost 20 years. And that was when Denis Villeneuve took a crack and made his Dune Part 1. And little did we know, like the book, this film would redefine the sci-fi genre forever.
And it's not just the science fiction genre. Dune effectively created the hero's journey standard for modern Messiah tales. And what I mean by that is if you look at movies that feature the chosen outcast who comes to a new world to unify it and stop the oppressors, it's most likely based off of the Paul Atreides storyline. And for a long time, many films were able to capture that innate magic presented within the pages of Dune, skyrocketing them into the public eye and cementing their place in pop culture. All the while, Dune sat untouched, only remembered by readers of the novel or fans of the '84 film. All of this is to say that it took decades for a studio to try again with this IP in a proper fashion. Warner Brothers took a calculated risk and it paid off in the most spectacular way possible. Dune Part 1 released in theaters in 2021 and ended its theatrical run with over $400 million worldwide. Given that the film had a budget of roughly $190 million, this was a smash success for Warner Brothers, who greenlit the sequel that same year.
Dune pushes the limits of its $190 million budget, giving us stunning visuals with what is arguably a medium-sized movie budget in today's standards. It also presents a fantastic story that stays extraordinarily faithful to the source material, with very slight changes. Things like gender swapping or time frames being shortened or reduced. In fact, I think the reworked story presented in Dune Part 1 and Part 2 works better than the story that was presented in the book. These two movies are a perfect example of how to adapt a franchise, and I think this will definitely have long-lasting effects. And although we can't be sure what these long-lasting effects are, I'm sure we as an audience will start to see it soon. For example, we might see more sci-fi movies like this in the coming years. Hell, we might even see studios try and obtain book rights. Overall, I'm pretty sure there will be a noticeable shift in audience preference because of these films.
This shift in audiences has become more apparent. Like the Star Wars craze in the 70s, casual audience members have now been introduced to a sci-fi soap opera, garnering more popularity than expected. After its theatrical run, Dune Part 2 nearly doubled its income, sitting at $714 million worldwide. This was a groundbreaking success, proving that audiences are ready for more. And more is exactly what we're getting. Not only is Dune Messiah, the second book in the series and third Dune movie, been greenlit, we are also getting Dune Prophecy, and if my timing is right, this video will launch the same day episode 1 is live. This show has been in production since 2022, 2 years before the release of Dune Part 2, meaning that Warner Bros. Has complete and utter faith in this project. And it has been a long time coming for a franchise to rival the likes of Star Wars. Warner Bros. Surprisingly found their golden ticket. Not in Dune's story itself, mind you, because we all know the story is fantastic when shown properly. No, they found their golden ticket in Denis Villeneuve and Greg Fraser, the two men who reimagined the Dune franchise and finally gave it a proper cinematic experience, changing audience perspective and inspiring young filmmakers across the globe.
I, for one, know this movie inspired me to read more. I personally am halfway through the third book and excited to read the rest of the franchise. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has done this. Movies that convince you to seek more about its lore and its franchise are extraordinarily special. Basically, what I'm trying to convey is that these two movies push the boundaries of CGI, budget, and filmmaking as a whole. They are some of the most important films we've gotten in the last decade. And if you haven't seen these movies, what are you doing? Go watch them. They are fantastic. You can watch them on Max. Go watch them now. If you're new here, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Also leave a comment telling me your favorite parts from Dune 1 and Dune 2. And if you've seen the Dune 1984 film, let me know if you enjoyed that movie. I personally didn't, but maybe you did. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Anyways, it's all from me, and I'll see you guys in the next one.